Okay, so welcome to today's webinar, which is, what did we call it, Mary? It's
The right stuff,
the right stuff. The right
and,
stuff.
and I forget the how to declutter where it counts. Yeah.
Brilliant, brilliant. Thank you. And this particular topic was a suggestion from one of the members of my Facebook group, Tea and Insights, Kevin, who's on the call. So that's great that Kevin's here with us live. It was his idea to explore this topic of decluttering and downsizing. And I thought, well, who do I know that's already downsized and and also is coming from this understanding, the inside out understanding as well. And straight away it was like, yep, Mary Schiller. And interestingly, it's something that you've been thinking about sharing anyway, Mary, but I'll let you introduce yourself in a moment and go from there. But just for people who don't know who I am, I'm Sara Sanderson, and I work as a transformational coach, and I run a Facebook group, as I said, called Tea and Insights, where I like to just have these types of webinars just to, it's basically to explore this wondrous human experience that we're having and how it actually works and how it works from the inside out. And that's what the group is about. It's an exploration group, and these webinars are just to kind of add a bit more flavor to our exploration. So that's me. This is being recorded. It will be available via the Facebook group, but also on YouTube. When it comes to asking questions, obviously we welcome questions and sharings as well, but you will then appear on the screen. So if that's something that you don't want to happen, because it will be available publicly, then you can type any question into the chat box, which is along the panel at the bottom for you. And if you do come on to speak, then the mute button to unmute yourself is in the bottom left. Okay, I think that's pretty much all you need to know. But like I said, any questions, just pop them in the chat box and I'll keep an eye on that. And Mary is our guest host today, so I'm going to hand over to Mary to introduce herself and just start the conversation. So thank you, Mary.
Thanks. Yeah, this is a really fun topic, and as Sara mentioned, it was something that I had sort of been mulling over for quite some time, actually, considering how my life has gone in terms of downsizing my homes and how I've kind of perceived that through this inside out understanding. So thanks for having me. So most of you may know me. I see a lot of familiar names on here. So I'm an author and coach. My website is maryschiller.com. And just really briefly, I have one group program for people who want to take a deep dive into the 3 principles that we meet a couple of times a month and have some really amazing calls. And then the other part of my business is helping people to have a very different experience of money and how to earn it in a way that is really fulfilling to them. So that's me in a nutshell. And I've written 11 books that are on Amazon. So I'm really interested to hear what you guys think about this topic too. So this is not just me blathering on. I'll pause at various points. So just before I got on the call, I decided to add up how many homes I've lived in during my lifetime, just because I thought that would be interesting to see. I'd never actually counted before. So I'm 56 years old, and I've lived in 19 homes during my lifetime. Ranging from the smallest being what I live in now to the largest was a home that I lived in for several years when I was like from 12 to 18 with my parents. That one was about 3,300 square feet. In square meters, I guess that would be 325 square meters, something like that. And it was only 3 of us living there on a very large piece of property. It was like a 5-bedroom house or some crazy thing. And it was just me and my parents, because I have 2 older siblings, but they are 20 years older than I am. So we hardly ever cohabitated. So that was the largest. And then the smallest is the one that I'm living in now, which is about 29 square meters, so just over 300 square feet. And it's been a really interesting process since about 2006. In 2006, my husband and I, we'd been thinking about it for a number of years, but we decided to move from our home in California to go live in New York City. We were really bored with where we were living. We felt like we had exhausted all of the professional opportunities there. It was a beautiful place. It's called San Luis Obispo, and it's a gorgeous place, but at the time it was just, we were just done. You know, you get to a point where you're just like, I'm over it. And so we had thought for a long time about moving to the East Coast just to try something different. And as it turned out, our daughter ended up getting accepted and decided to go to New York University. So she was already in New York City when we started the process of selling our house and moving. So at that time, we had a home that was, by California standards, actually pretty small. It was 1,400 square feet. And I think it had, I guess it was 3 bedrooms, you know, 2.5 bathrooms, whatever. And the process of decluttering before moving across the country was really arduous. It was, I mean, I think I hauled, we had this vehicle. It was kind of a small vehicle called a Scion. It would sort of look like a toaster kind of car made by Toyota. And I think I filled that thing up 10 times and went to the dump with stuff. I could not believe how much stuff we had in that house. And it was really quite shocking because it didn't look cluttered. The house itself, you know, I always kept it really clean and there wasn't a lot of stuff around, but there was stuff everywhere, like in cubby holes, and it had tons of storage. So I think I just shoved stuff in everywhere. And I think the most difficult task was I had never parents, you'll appreciate this. If your kids are young, listen to me very carefully. I never organized any of my daughter's things from school. Like all the papers and stuff of hers that I'd saved, they were just thrown into boxes. You know, 18 years worth of her life was in these boxes. And I was like, well, I can't just take all these boxes to New York. That's ridiculous. So I literally handled every single piece of paper, every report card, every item that she had and that we had in these boxes, and tried to figure out what would be the best things to save. And that was really, really tough. I have to tell you, it was hard to decide what things to throw out and what things to keep. And I kept calling her and going, do you want this? And she was like, Mom, you know, I'm not sentimental about this stuff, right? So I really don't care what you keep. It's yours, you know, it's not for me, just, you know, whatever. And so I was like, I know, but I don't want to throw out your sweatshirt from when you were on the basketball team. You know? It's just like, oh, how do I make these decisions? So I finally made the decisions. And so we moved across the country, sold our house and moved to New York City. And we lived in a place temporarily that was, I don't remember how big it was. We were only there for about 3 or 4 months. And then we moved into an apartment in the Bronx that was about 600 square feet. And it had 1 closet. And it had a small storage unit in a basement area. So when we got there, I had to throw out a few more things because it still didn't quite work. And so I had to get rid of more stuff. And then what was really interesting too was we lived in that apartment for about 10 years. And at one point, about 18 months, we actually had my daughter living with us too. It was a 1-bedroom apartment, 600 square feet, 1 bathroom, tiny kitchen that could really only hold 1 person at a time. And she slept on a Murphy bed in the living room. It was a very nice Murphy bed, I must say. But basically, she had sort of the living room to herself, and we had the bedroom. And then we kind of just shared that space for a while. She was there doing her doctoral research, and I didn't want her to spend money on an expensive apartment. So we made that work. And that was a very interesting experience too, because we, really had to be aware of how many items were in the space. If you live in a larger space, you don't think about that stuff. If you have a garage, you never think about, where am I going to put this when I bring it home? Well, we had sold our cars. We didn't have cars anymore. We didn't have a garage. All we had was that one storage unit and one closet. And that closet had to hold all of our clothes, all of our, pantry stuff, everything, vacuum cleaner, all that stuff, winter clothes, summer clothes, everything. So that in and of itself was a very good exercise in seeing what's really necessary and what isn't. And every time I would go out shopping for something, I would say, is this something I really want badly enough to find a place to put it? And it was actually a really helpful question to ask. So kind of fast forwarding a little bit, we decided to move here, and we had owned this apartment for several years. We bought it back in 2008, and we never intended to live in it. We bought it as more of an investment, and we were renting it out to people who were coming to Paris on vacation. And then when it became clear through a lot of circumstances that we wanted to try to move to France, we said, well, I guess we're going to go live in that apartment. And this is half the size of the one we were living in the Bronx. And this is just one room. It's a studio with a bathroom that's separate. But that's it. It's just one room. And so there we were again, going through all of our stuff in New York. And actually, I was doing that myself. My husband had to be in California because his father was ill. So I went through that entire process myself. Again, taking things, out to the dumpster and just marveling at still how much stuff could fit in a 600 square foot apartment. I was like, this is crazy. And it almost seems, I don't know if you guys can relate to this, it almost seems like it has like rabbits, like stuff just multiplies on its own or something, especially papers. Kevin's giving me the thumbs up. It's like, where did all this stuff come from? I don't remember bringing this in here. So this time we didn't bring any of the kind of sentimental stuff. I still pared that way down, because by the time we were moving here, my daughter had graduated from college and had also gotten a higher degree, a master's degree. So I had all of that stuff. I had pictures of all that and, all these mementos. And so we asked my sister-in-law. She has a huge house with like a gigantic, it's hard to explain how huge this is. They have a business on their property and they have a big warehouse basically. So I was like, could we put like 4 boxes in your warehouse? And she's like, yeah. So we didn't bring any of that stuff here because there's literally no space. We have no storage except what's in the apartment. There is a basement here that has some storage units, but our apartment doesn't have one of them. So all we have is, we each have our own closet, and we have a tiny hall closet, and we have 4 drawers for our clothes. We have a bookcase that you can kind of see behind me. That's it right there. It's dinky. And then there's one over to my right. We have a small kitchen that has enough for 2 to 3 people, stuff in it. And when our daughter comes to visit, we're actually reconfiguring things now, but she sleeps on a fold out in sort of the bigger living space. And through all of these downsizing maneuvers, especially after I came across the 3 principles and the sort of inside out understanding, it started to become very obvious to me that the sentimental attachment I felt to certain things was a mirage. And that actually it isn't even remotely about having these things to look at or to touch or anything like that. At one point when we were packing stuff to go into my sister-in-law's storage unit and deciding what we were going to bring here, which wasn't much. We brought 2 cats with us, by the way, too. We have 2 cats living here in this space, which is interesting. I kind of realized that, and I hope this doesn't sound too morbid, but I thought, what am I going to want to look at when I'm on my deathbed? You know, what am I going to want to look at? What am I going to want to hold in my hand? Is it a photograph of somebody? You know, is it an object? And that's kind of how I started to look at things. Like, I don't need any of this to have a good feeling all day long. I don't need to look around my house or my home and see all of these different items to make me feel good. It just became so obvious that it wasn't about that. It really kind of came down to that simple question of, what would I like to see at that point of my life here? And that made it a lot easier to let go of things, because a lot of stuff just started to look really unimportant to me. So I'm looking at the chat here. Yeah, our stuff mates in the night. It kind of has that. That's funny. Oh, it kind of has that feeling. Lisa, we built an extension to give us an extra bedroom. It's still way too cluttered in here. I have such a sentimental attachment to the kids' things, but I'm getting better at it. I accepted the other day I was going to be upset when sorting through clothes they've outgrown. I took breaks and managed quite well. Lisa, I can totally relate to that, because when I was cleaning out that house in California, you know, we had lived there for a long time. My daughter, we had moved there when she was 9, and she, you know, moved out when she was 18. So we had a lot of her clothes still that she had outgrown, and I had a lot of her baby things still that I never really looked at. And I cried a lot. I did. I had major crying jags during that process. But it still was nice to realize later, when I came across this understanding, that it's not about the stuff at all. It's all in here, and it's never going anywhere. Even if I got rid of everything that I owned, or it all was destroyed in a fire or something, you know, yeah, I would feel sad, but I would still have everything. I'd still have it, because it's all in here. So that was a huge kind of relief to me. And I still kind of look at my daily life in that way. I don't look to things to make me feel happy. First of all, I don't have room for things in here, so that makes it easy to look elsewhere, meaning in here, for happiness. I can't just go out and buy the latest whatever it is, because I don't have a place to put it. And I don't bring anything in here unless I know where it's going to go. So it's kind of an interesting discipline in a way that also makes you just naturally be, I think, more introspective and more interested in connecting with the real source of these good feelings, which isn't in the stuff. So I think I'll pause there and see if anybody has any questions or anything other than what was in the chat.
I'd like to just jump in, Mary, with I'm with you 100% with where my feelings are coming from, and that I have got so much better with decluttering since this understanding. But I'll throw a but in there. I have this. I can see I have this tendency for what makes logical and practical sense to keep, because if I don't have it and then I need it, I'm going to have to then buy it again. So there's that piece going on, that if I get rid of things that could be useful, then I'll have to buy them again. And then I also fall into this situation of oh, but some of the things I've got, okay, I don't need them anymore, but they're worth something, I should really sell them. And then of course I don't get round to selling them. So if you wouldn't mind speaking a little bit on that, just seeing where what I'm potentially not seeing, missing, that'd be really cool. Thank you.
Yeah. Well, I kind of ran into that a few times too, because for instance, I used to have a sewing machine back in the US, and I brought it from California to New York. And I realized, well, first of all, it won't really work over in France because the plug is wrong. And then I thought to myself, how often do I really use this? At that point, I wasn't sewing regularly like I had been years prior to that. And I probably only used it once every 6 months to fix something. And I realized I don't need a sewing machine. I don't have a place to put one anyway. If I need something hemmed, I'll take it to the tailor down the street. So you kind of find ways to do things without what you think you need. Like there's a lot of appliances that I don't have here that I used to have in the States. When we moved here, I was like, do I really need a big mixer? Because I had a really nice KitchenAid. Well, first of all, I have very limited counter space, and it was going to take up a lot of it. I was like, no, I don't. So I just got a hand mixer thingy. So I use that, and it works perfectly. And sometimes I don't even use that. Sometimes I give my arm a workout, and I just use that. We were like, do we need a blender? No, don't need a blender. We got one of those ones that has like a plastic thing, like a plunger, and you use that. It works great, So there are a lot of things that I think we've grown accustomed to believing that we need, and it's just not true. Even in this modern existence of ours, there are a lot of things that we think we need that we don't actually use that often. And as far as selling things, I did have a moving sale in California because we had a lot of things that I felt somebody would really like. And then what we didn't sell, we donated or I took to the dump. And I think, I don't know, this is kind of a cliche, I guess, but like if you have things sitting around that you haven't touched in like a year, do you actually need that thing? Or is it just something you have to dust regularly? And the other part is, could somebody else use it? Could somebody else really use it? We're doing some redesigning and decorating in this apartment right now. And we're going to sell off almost everything I'm looking at right now, except for the bed. I have to dispose of that. But there are some really nice lamps, a nice sofa, a nice table that is sitting on. Somebody could use these things, and we don't need them anymore, but somebody else might. And so that was a helpful kind of thought process for me to go through was, could somebody else use this? And if so, how could I get it to them? Would a garage sale be the right way? Would some kind of donation to a charity be the right way? And I found that really helpful. So I'm not sure if that answered your question, Sarah, but let me know. I see a question or a comment, at least from Allie. Hi, Allie. Food for thought for sure. I just counted up and have lived in 33 places, 16 before I was 15 years old. Wow. When I moved from New Zealand to New Orleans 17 years ago, I brought almost nothing. Now it's grown unbelievably. I really noticed how much more acquisitive, what a cool word, I became after moving to the US. But after Hurricane Katrina, for 18 months, I lived with what I could carry in my car and relied on the kindness of friends and strangers for everything else. Such extreme experiences. I'd love to find my own beautiful, peaceful balance, depending only on me, not the culture I'm in or anyone else's opinions. Oh, wow, that brings up a lot of stuff in my mind, Allie, because now, being from the US, first of all, my American friends and family really looked at us askance just for wanting to move to France. Okay, I'll just put that out there. We had some really interesting conversations with people who were just like, what in the world are you doing? Of course, after the election, they were all like, can we come? But anyway, that's a whole other story. But so that was the first thing. And then the second thing was everybody says, oh my gosh, how can you live in a one-room apartment that's 300 square feet? I would want to kill my spouse if that's how we lived. Well, one of our friends here is a real estate expert here in Paris. She's actually pretty well known. And she talks about that a lot when she goes on television programs. And she's like, you don't get it. Space doesn't equal happiness. Okay? Space does not equal happiness. It just doesn't. And Allie, that's what your comment reminded me of, that things and space don't make you happier or unhappier. And, I love the city that I'm living in. To me, I would live in half this amount of space if I had to in order to be here, because I just love it here so much. So I feel incredibly blessed, or I don't know what the word is, to have even this much space. In fact, we were looking at some furnishings for the place, and the guy at the store said, well, how big is your apartment? And we said, oh, it's about 29 square meters. And he says, oh, that's big. He's like, we're working with someone right now whose place is 18 square meters. We got to fit everything in there, kitchen, bathroom, everything. He's like, 29. He's like, that's no problem. We can deal with that. So I was like, it's all in your perspective. What's large, what's small. People in like Tokyo live in a much smaller space than this with a lot more people, and they seem to manage just fine. And so it's all been a very educational experience, not just in how to live small, but how to see what's really going on inside me, and recognizing that my good feelings every day are not coming from the fact that I have, a big house with a pool like I used to have. I don't attach any piece of my identity at all to my home anymore, which is quite freeing. I think a lot of people get a bit trapped in that whirlwind of thinking that they are their house. They can't change their home. I have people who are near and dear to me who are in that situation, who just can't bear to let go of their home, even though it would actually be a really smart thing for them to do, because their thinking is so tied up in this house is me, So thanks for that. Hi, Kevin. I have a student in Paris that is in 14 meters. See, it's an eye-opener how people in other cultures live. Yeah, a studette. Those are those really tiny ones, for sure. So ours is about double that, which is not big, but it's, what else do you need? It's got a place for us to sleep. It's got a place for us to sit. I can do all of my work here. It's got a really nice kitchen, and I'm redoing the bathroom. That's been interesting. We don't have a working toilet today because the toilet was removed to put in new tile and a new toilet. So our solutions to that, in case you're interested, were we used the facilities at the nearby park. We also used, there's a really, I don't know if you guys have ever seen the public toilets here in Paris on the sidewalks. They're really cool. They're those disinfecting ones. So we've used that. And then because we live in an old weird building, there's a toilet in the stairwell in downstairs, like one flight. There's an old toilet in there that somebody has a key to. Unfortunately, they lock it at night. So to deal with the night problem, we bought a chemical toilet that is now sitting in the living space. So in case anything should happen overnight, we don't have to run to the park. But you just figure things out, you just figure things out, and you realize that all of the things that you used to think were necessary, they're only necessary because you think they are, and you're kind of buying into that all the time. So I wanted to just say one other thing too, is, the subtitle of this was something like Decluttering Where It Counts. And for me, the decluttering process that has really mattered to me is the one that I did related to the thoughts I was listening to in my own head. That my mind was full of a lot of strange thinking for a long time. And when I was able to kind of step back and look at it, like you can kind of do with your house sometimes. You know how you walk into a room and you suddenly see it for what it is, and you're like, oh my God, look at all this junk. What am I doing with all this? That's kind of what happened in my own head, was I kind of stepped out of myself and went, wow, look at all that stuff you're listening to. Why are you listening to that? And I decided I wasn't going to listen to it anymore whenever it came in. Thoughts that told me I had something wrong with me, thoughts that told me, I had some kind of mental condition, and thoughts that told me I would never do this or that, or, I just decided, well, I don't have to listen to that, because I think I even used the word cluttering up my life, and I would rather not do that to myself. So to me, that's the only kind of decluttering that is really key to having a better experience of this life we've been given. It's not about the stuff. So anybody else have a comment, or are you struggling at all with any topics like this?
Mary, can you hear me?
Yeah.
That's a very interesting statement you just made. So the takeout from that is I don't need to worry about my physical clutter, because inside my head, everything is fine.
That's right. That's right.
That's not going to sort the mess out that I'm currently existing in.
Well, don't count that out, though, because, you know, when you start to have more of a sense of what's really going on internally, it's amazing how much the external stuff can start to change without you even having to do a lot. That's not to say you won't have to physically take things out. You will. But, you know, like, I'll give you an example. When we were trying to move from New York to here, I won't bore you with the details, but a lot of stuff had to happen. You know, we had to sell our apartment, which was, I had to clean it out. I like redid half of it. I, you know, did all of this work in there because, like I said, my husband was in California. We had to sell it. We had to deal with a bunch of weird paperwork stuff. New York is a very strange place to buy and sell real estate. And then we had to move temporarily to California for 3 months. And all that time we were trying to gather all the paperwork to apply for the visa to come here. And it took us a year to get that whole thing sorted out. And it was really great to have this understanding during that process, because I knew that anytime I was feeling kind of urgent or stressed, I could ignore it. And I think that it had a major influence over how easily things actually kind of went, and how the whole process went a lot more smoothly. At least that was my experience of it. Maybe somebody else would have had different thinking and would have, you know, really been buying into all of that urgency and stress. And I just wasn't going to go there. And I've been amazed at how my external situation and circumstances have changed pretty easily with this understanding. So don't necessarily think that it can't impact that aspect of your life if you want to get rid of some stuff.
Okay, well, here's a particular problem which I'd be very interested in your view on. For many, many years, I love magazines, and my problem historically has been I've been too busy to read them. So certain types of magazines especially about music, for example, or football, which I'm into, you know, I bought them. There's fascinating articles in them. I've just piled them up. I've still got to read them. I haven't thrown them out. So to me, emotionally, you know, that's information that I think that I will enjoy one day. And yet, up to this point, I've never had the time to actually do it. Mm-hmm. So the logical conclusion is just get shot of them. But there's a feeling that I that's going to be difficult for me to do.
Well, have you tried? Like, have you gotten rid of one?
Yeah, I mean, a few years ago, I just with individual issues, I actually, because I'd read the content, I then let them go. So I've let go of stuff which I've read. Yes, it's the stuff I haven't read which I struggle with, because I think, well, I bought this thing and I bought it for a reason, and it hasn't served its purpose yet. So it still has a place. With the consequence, I end up with piles of the damn things. So,
well, I have a couple of ideas for you. One is what I was saying earlier was, would someone else appreciate it more?
Okay. I'm not sure, to be honest with you. I do not know.
You know, if you're not using it, there might be somebody else who would. That's one thing.
Okay.
And the other thing is that I see some questions there, so I'll get them. The other thing is that, and this is from, some of you may have heard me say this before, but this is from a dear friend and coach of mine who says, you know, human beings are not museums. Okay? So we have stuff that comes into our life and we, you know, maybe do certain things, and then it's okay to realize, oh, I'm kind of over that. You know, she's like, we're not museums. We're more like art galleries. Okay, an exhibition comes in, hangs out for a while, we really enjoy it, and then moves on. New one comes in. And that has been a helpful notion to me many times. You know, when I dumped my old career entirely overnight and did something different, that was how that was how I experienced it. It was like, well, that museum, that's closed. That exhibition that was there for 20 years is gone. There's a new me, a new aspect of myself that I want to explore. And that may be what is happening there too, that you're kind of seeing yourself as this museum when instead you're actually an art gallery that's designed to change and explore new things.
I like that one. That's good. Yeah, I can resonate with that idea.
Yeah, cool. Cool. I see Vanessa. I always feel anxious when I have to part with things I've accumulated over the years. I now have to declutter. So my girlfriend's moving in. I've moved things from cupboards into plastic bags. They're in the spare room. Getting there. Found photos from school over 20 years ago. I never thought it was so long ago. I feel like I've been asleep for 20 years. Where did the time go? Oh yeah, tell me about it. When I unearthed all that stuff in the storage spaces in my house, it was crazy. It was crazy. And it is, you know, like I said, it is a very emotional thing, because suddenly you're looking at all your belongings and they kind of track your life, you know, and it can get very emotional. But, you know, later when I had a different perspective on it, I realized, you know, those items that I let go of, that I took to the dump, they're not gone, you know, they're still part of my experience. I still experienced them at some point. So they're never, just like people, they're never really gone totally. You know, they are always living in your experience of yourself. Abby, I declutter every year, which I really enjoy, but with 3 young children, I struggle decluttering all their stuff. Never found a system that means I can store their toys. You know what I would do in that case? I would hire somebody to help me. I would say, look, I got all this stuff I got to organize. What should I do with it? Because I can imagine that would be really frustrating. I only had one child, so I can't really relate to that. But, you know, there have been times where I've hired someone to help me with something that I just couldn't figure out for myself. And it does wonders. It takes that off of your plate. And then you can train your kids to put stuff where it belongs, which is always nice.
Can I butt in?
Yeah. Hi, Chris.
Hi. Well, recently, that was September last year, we made a move to a country cottage on a small peninsula. Beautiful place. And the place we lived before, I lived for 28 years. I had a large CD collection, you know, and books and shelves, and I just had to get rid of it.
Mm-hmm.
And I like my things, you know, the feeling of, oh yeah, that'll come in use, that'll be handy. Kitchen equipment and stuff. So, so I was kind of forced to let go. Mm-hmm. And now well, right now, the only thing left, more or less, there's a mattress, I believe, that has some value, and it's going to give me, you know, I'm going to earn a lot of money at this. And my wife keeps saying, when are you going to throw that out? It's, you know, so there's something still hanging on, but I'm getting there. And I must say, I haven't regretted it. Actually, you can stream music nowadays.
Yeah.
So my big speakers, good hi-fi out. But luckily, my wife said, "Okay, you can buy a Sonos system instead." So yeah, so that's what happened. So I also think that in some ways, for me, technology, that the advances in technology have also helped. It doesn't have to be, you know, big, grand, like 70s style anymore.
Nope.
And I'm really enjoying life, and so it's just to give my. But I think it for me it has been helpful that there was this date we had to make the transition, and I'm so happy that it happened, because it's also made me see some things more clearly, also about attachment and you know, thinking, of course, and I also think what these feng shui people are talking about, that when you get things out of your life, you also have space of other things to move in. So it also creates a different energy, a different feel. Instead of living in this museum, it suddenly gets more alive and vibrant in a way. You know, just realizing that some magazine or book that was really interesting when I studied at university, you know, all these books, I don't need them, you know, and half of them I hadn't read, or only read partially. And,
right.
And really, that's just clutter in your brain, isn't it? Because it's a belief system that says, well, something will be important in the future, and it was important in the past. So where do you get your present? Yeah, see, you're kind of avoiding your own life in a way, and becoming a custodian.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. A custodian of stuff and of old thinking.
Exactly.
Both.
So
yeah.
That's just, yeah.
Yeah, great. That's really helpful, Chris. Yeah, because who wants that? You know, I don't want to keep listening to old stale thinking as much as I don't want to keep looking at old stale belongings that are not of use to me. You know, one of my phrases with thought is, if you've heard a thought more than once, you can forget it. You don't need to listen to it anymore, because why would you? It's not new anymore. So, you know, I have this thing like second thoughts, I can dismiss them. And, you know, it's kind of the same with stuff, seems to me. Like, if it served its purpose, then it served its purpose and you don't need it anymore. There's nothing that it is going to do for you at this point. I also think about this when I go on vacation. Like, when you go on vacation, you don't bring your whole house full of stuff with you, right? So what does that show you? Do you really need all that stuff? Not really, you know. Yeah, that was good. Thanks to, holding on to our stuff is outside in thinking. Yeah, I guess I would say, Kevin, Linda, that I think that it is, well, I don't know how to say this. Outside in is also a figment of our imagination, because it doesn't work like that. So it seems to me that we're listening to thoughts saying we need all these things in order to feel good. And we all on this call realize that that's simply not true, because our default setting is pretty darn good without any objects whatsoever. And so I just kind of, if I have any thoughts like, I wish we had a bigger apartment or whatever, you know, sometimes I entertain that as sort of a fun idea, but I don't get all wrapped up in it. Like, I don't go, you know, oh, it's such a bummer. And I just don't go down that road. I ignore that kind of stuff. And, you know, for me, it would be exciting to have a bigger place, just because it would mean that, you know, maybe I've made more of an impact and made more money to be able to afford that. That would be exciting, but it's not because it's about my identity anymore, if that makes sense. I wouldn't mind having a separate bedroom. That might be nice eventually. But thankfully, my husband and I get along. Oh, you just bought another iPad. Well, iPads are tiny. We can fit those in here. We have two. Let's see, Kevin, you can get all your books and music on the, yeah, exactly. You know, we we do have a few DVDs here that were actually here for people who rented the apartment when we were using it for a vacation rental for people, and we just haven't gotten rid of them. But most of our stuff is online or on our computers now anyway. My daughter does have one issue with books, is that she has a really hard time reading electronically. She can't really do that. She's got weird eye problems and stuff, and so she has to read actual books. And she's in the last stages of getting her doctoral degree, so she's got a huge collection of books in storage at school, because she's like, well, I don't want to get rid of them, because if I become a faculty member somewhere, I'll probably need a lot of these for reference. So she just keeps accumulating these books. So I said, well, eventually you're going to have a lot of bookcases somewhere for those things. And she's like, well, I'm hoping it'll be an office at some university someplace. I said, don't look at me. We don't have the room for them. Oh, funny. Anybody else? It's so fun to see all the names here that I recognize. Thanks you guys for coming. I don't see. Oh.
Yeah, I just think it's interesting. It strikes me that there's two things. Society makes you believe you need to acquire stuff, and it's a bit of a myth. Some of the happiest people in the world, I mean, you know, in remote villages in the third world, are amongst the most happy people. They have very, very little. They just have literally what they need. And the other thing, I think there is an eternal law of space, in that the more you have, doesn't matter how much you have, you will always find a way to fill it.
Yeah.
There's people guilty of that. Call it the immutable law of space.
Mm-hmm.
But,
and how much of your space are you actually living in? That's the other thing. You know, if you look at your house, you know, are you really living in all of the spaces in there? I would venture to say probably not. I certainly wasn't when we had the house in San Luis Obispo. There was one room that I almost never went in. It was a guest room. And I used to have a computer in there, and then I moved the computer out of there and we had sort of a large hallway that sort of was like a nook thing. So I just moved it in there, and then I hardly ever went into that third bedroom, you know. So that was several hundred square feet I wasn't using. So it's just kind of interesting if you look at your foot patterns in your house, you can kind of see where you're actually spending your time.
Yes, we had an extension done in the previous house whereby you convert the attic into rooms, and for the first 2 years they were just used as dumping spaces until we took control of it and then started using it for Airbnb, and suddenly it was worthwhile having those rooms. Before that, it was pointless, but fortunately we saw the lights.
Sarah, you can never have enough of what you don't need. Yeah, Dr. Pettit said something like that regarding addiction. Yeah, that's good. That's an interesting quote. I wanted to say one other thing too about what you just mentioned, Kevin, about what society says you need. I mean, I used to live in Los Angeles. I lived there for about 13 years. And in Los Angeles, you know, you're very much identified by what kind of car you drive, because you spend so much time in your car. It's kind of part of your identity. Well, I haven't now owned a car for 11 and a half years, something like that. So what happened to my identity? You know, I guess I don't have one anymore. I don't know. Now my car is my feet, or the metro, which is, you know, fine, or the trains around here, which are currently on strike every other day, but whatever. You know, you just kind of start to realize that a lot of these beliefs are just full of air. They're nothing. They are just completely meaningless. And, you know, I think, like I've heard Michael Neal say, and like I repeated, if you lost everything, you'd still have everything. If you lost everything, you would still have everything. And that's how life really looks to me. I don't worry about anything occurring in my life because I know that that's true. Can't lose the memories, exactly. They're always there. And you don't need stuff to remind you of them either. You know, they just pop in randomly. Yeah, like today I had a random thought about my dog that I had when I was a kid. And I was like, I wonder where that thought came from. It's nice though, you know. Anybody else have a thought about this?
I've got a thought about this need we have to accumulate stuff and have stuff, particularly in the West where it's readily available for us to to accumulate stuff. And it kind of, what just sort of came to me is it reminds me of this of the need of my sort of, you know, the separate self to have some kind of status and importance. And because really, yes, we're having a human experience. So part of that human experience is to have this illusion of is to have this separate self, our personality, our ego. But actually, we can live quite fine with ignoring pretty much what you know. We don't have to buy into what our personality is, like personality traits and all of that. I remember I used to be really gung-ho around what type of person am I and all of that, you know. And now that I've kind of let go of all of that stuff, I can see that there's a bit of a parallel with physical objects as well. But my identity in a way is no different from all of the other stuff that I accumulate. I feel that I need it. You know, there's this kind of clinging on. But when I really look at it, I can see through it. It is all kind of smoke and mirrors, and that, and it's not coming from a space of love. When I think about, you know, earlier I was saying about the practical piece, but maybe I think I'm being sensible holding on to stuff. But no, if I really look at it, I think there's an element of not wanting to let stuff go. But again, I suppose, it is thought. But yeah. So I'm not entirely sure what I'm saying, but I can kind of see a parallel with who I think I am and stuff.
Yeah, that identity thing. Like we have to somehow construct an identity, and part of that construction of identity is what we own. But none of that is actually true. And if you really look at it from, you know, if you step way, way back, I mean, it's quite obvious that, to me at least, that we have no identity. We are neutral, just like everything else. Everything's neutral. And it only looks like we're a certain way at certain times. And other times we look another way to ourselves. And so it's all very fluid. And that's why I think it's kind of cool to look at this from the aspect of objects in our lives and say, you know, does this really represent me? How could it possibly? Nothing could represent me. There is no object in the world that could ever do that. If there is, I'd like to see it. That would be quite amazing. So yeah. Kevin says, take digital photos. Yeah, it's interesting. I didn't do that when I was cleaning out the house, mostly because I don't know. I just didn't feel like I wanted to have that even. I kind of just wanted the feeling of whatever it was, and that was it. But that's a good idea. Hi, Helen. Hey, a part of the fear of getting rid of sentimental things, if the things aren't there to remind us, we'll forget precious memories. Sometimes finding an old thing in a box does remind us of something lovely. I think it does and it doesn't. I mean, like I said, I had a really nice memory today of my dog. I haven't thought of her in a really long time. And I didn't need a picture of her for that memory to come along. And I don't need to look at a picture of my mom to remember her, or my dad to remember him. You know, they're present. All of this stuff is present. with us all the time. So I haven't felt any less of that since I downsized and got rid of all of those things and don't have them around me. I still have lots of beautiful thoughts about people. So yeah, so I'm not sure I quite see it that way anymore.
But one thing that I find an idea that helps me in terms of sorting out the huge amount of stuff I've acquired is the thought that, do I really want my son to have to deal with all this if by some chance something happened tomorrow, next week, in 3 months' time, suddenly you're not around?
Mm-hmm.
It'd be distressing enough for him that I wasn't around, but then to have to actually wade through all the CRAP that I've collected. Awful for him, and that's a huge incentive for me to just sort my life out, as it were, on that level.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it also might help to have someone come and help you with it. Have him come help you with it.
Okay. Yeah.
You're not in this by yourself. There are people who would be willing to come help with it, I'm sure.
Yeah. Good idea.
Mm-hmm. It might help you see things a little more objectively too.
Yes, there's a huge amount of emotion tied up with this stuff, and
Mm-hmm.
there's like, not anymore, but I remember watching a series on television, and someone had a place they lived in which was obviously ridiculous. They had so much stuff that it was almost unlivable. But the thing that the program always got to the nub of was the emotions that the person attached to, and it was an insecurity thing. Their security was wrapped up in the physical possession because they were not able to understand that actually that was an irrelevance.
Yeah,
So
exactly.
inside their own minds and move on. But symbolically, some people couldn't do it. Some people just were not able to let go.
Yeah, it really helps to know that things like security and happiness and all those things are intrinsic, that we don't have to have anything in order for those to exist. That's been hugely helpful to me, to recognize that all those things are innate and we don't have to get them somehow or keep them somehow. So yeah, that's a good point. Vanessa had to help with your ex when his mom passed. Yeah, it's difficult. Endless family portraits and paintings. Mm-hmm. Yeah. How do you deal with a spouse who doesn't want to declutter? Well, I think it goes back to helping people to see where their emotions are actually coming from. It all comes back to that, right? It all comes back to the fact that nothing out there can transmit a feeling into us or trigger a feeling in us. It doesn't work like that. It can never work like that. So for me, it's just been hugely helpful in all areas of life to keep remembering that. So that's the cure to everything as far as I'm concerned. Not just decluttering, but any problem, that's the cure for it.
I have a comment.
Yeah.
I heard Keith Blevins recently, and he said something like that Sydney Banks had said that what's creating the world's problems is that people, what insanity is when you put feelings onto objects.
Mm-hmm.
So you give an object a status that you're doing it, yeah. You're producing this connection, and when we do that, when we don't see where the feelings are coming from, that we're creating it. It's not the object,
right?
It's not the picture or the CD or the book. It's what we're doing, and every time we do this, we enter some kind of insanity, I guess.
Well, it's interesting. I just want to get to Vanessa's question because it relates to what you were saying, Chris. How is it easier to help others to declutter but not ourselves? Because objects do not transmit emotions, okay? You would look at a picture of someone and you might go, oh, I feel this way. I'd look at them and be, who the hell's that? I don't feel anything. It's because it's not coming from the picture. It's coming from you. So that's why it's easy to help someone else, because objects do not transmit feelings. So, you know, if you ever need to prove this point, that's one way to prove it. You know, do you have the same response when experiencing the same object as another person? No. Therefore, it cannot be the object itself. It's inside the person. And they are just looking at it like the object is making them feel that way. But clearly, it can't be doing that because objects can't do that. And if they could, that would be a really good YouTube video. I'd like to see that one.
That's such a cool thing to end on, Mary. And I'm also gonna give a shout out to my friend Danielle Waldock, because she is my declutter companion. Whenever I declutter, I always get Danielle to come round, because, like you say, she does not have any kind of, you know, there's no thinking going on for her about any sentimental attachment to any, you know, of any of my clothes or, you know, any of my possessions. So it's just brilliant because she's ruthless and she's just
yeah.
And it all just goes. And like I said, I definitely noticed though this time round, since having this deeper understanding of where my feelings are coming from, I was able to get rid of a lot more stuff, and she was actually bowled over. She's like, something's different.
That's cool.
Yeah, we had bags and bags, about 10 bags the last time she came, which was
wow,
pretty cool. So yes, definitely get someone else to assist. I think that's a great way to declutter. But like you say, Mary, it is first and foremost about decluttering what's going on in our head first and foremost anyway. So yeah, thank you so much for joining me. Have you got any last things to say before we I'll just mention that wherever you're watching this video, there'll be links to Mary's website and what she does as well, so you'll be able to find that out and continue to receive information from Mary and what she gets up to. But yeah, Mary, over to you just to kind of finish the webinar off.
Yeah, and I think someone just joined, and I think I told her the wrong time. Did I tell you the wrong time, Terry? I did. It's because I had the wrong time. Sara will attest to that I was very confused because I thought anyway, long story. It's all the dust in the apartment. I'll just blame it on that. So yeah, just to sum up, I'd love for you guys to come find me, maryschiller.com. And this was recorded for those of you who couldn't join live. And Sara will share the link with us, right?
Yes.
Okay, cool. Thanks, you guys. Sorry about that, Terry.
I'll just unmute everyone so we can say bye. Okay, thanks for coming, everybody. Bye.
Thank you, Mary.
Adios, au revoir. À bientôt.
Bye.